Hello. Let me start just by saying, David, thank you for everything you've done for those seen, but also those unseen. During those crisis years of Greece, your leadership in an oasis of peace and prosperity was stable, visionary, solid, fair. Well, everyone is fair, right? And, you know, one of the proud things that I have is what we've done together in the last 13 years. I remember our first meeting vividly. You were sitting right there, and we agreed to set up this internship program, and here we are today. So you will be missed. Okay, thank you. You know, so often people that do good things are not thanked enough. Okay, me? So thank you. I'll just say a few words, then I'll invite the general up to come and join me for a fireside chat. I think, you know, to tell you all, some of you know, some of you don't, the history of the collaboration that we have with Didi, what it led to, why we did it, because the why is often more important than the what. So 2011, Greece is a D class, you know, everyone's being looked down upon. The Greeks are less than, but they want to be more than. The Greeks can't be the best version of themselves, but they want to be the best version of themselves. So I'm going to Greece and seeing the talent and the power, the soul, the eyes, the bright eyes of the young Greeks. And then you leave and you hear about how awful the Greeks are, how lazy the young ones are. So, you know, we got angry progressively over a period of time. And then one day, and I've never shared this story publicly, but now, you know, what the hell, I will do it. I just say what I feel these days, Mike, as you know. I'm at a dinner, okay? And I'm at a dinner with the high and mighty of our society here in America. People that have the power to change. But to have the power to change, you need the choice to back it up. What's power without choice? So I'm sitting at this dinner, and there's all these big guys there around, and, you know, they're criticizing Greece and criticizing the country. And you know, sorry, aren't you from there? Like at some point in your lives, like maybe 1 or 2 generations before. So I start to become angry, but inside. And as the minutes go by, I become angrier and angrier and angrier. And after 1 hour, burnt internal anger increased systems, someone says something really dumb, like really dumb. So I'm like, man, you know what? No. So I said, you know, everyone here tonight, and everyone went silent. You all have a choice. You can choose to contribute to the solution or keep complaining about the problem. It's a choice you make. We are free in this country because of people like this guy and the men and women that came before him, and we'll hear from him soon. So what we're going to do is set up an internship program for 10 young Greek kids. That's easy. What? And silence. And then we had an event at this Greek America Foundation. There were 5,000 people there. I had a speech. The teleprompter broke. One of those moments. Thank God I have the backup speech in my pocket, right? Whenever you make a public speech, always go with a backup if you're using a prompter. Always. It's just not worth the risk. Like in front of 5,000 people, I'm like, So we announced the program, and then a few weeks later, David came to my office, and we decided to partner with ACG, and hence it began. Where is it today? We are 13 years on. We take between 70 and 80 young interns per annum into our group. They get to work in organizations like Seleni. They get to work in organizations like Aria Hotels. They get to work at Libra. How many interns, former or current, do we have in this room? Put your hand up. Okay. So we have Colombians. We have interns from 60 countries. All started from anger, but anger that was properly processed. Because anger that's improperly processed leads to the dark side, right? I mean, Yoda taught us that. But anyway, I would like to invite a very special person to join me on stage for a fluid, impromptu fireside chat discussion. This man is as close to a perfect combination of steel and empathy. Steel and empathy, okay? The best leaders have both. You need both. Under his command is close to 800,000 soldiers. He's the head of ForceCom. He's been in battle. He has seen the dark side of the force. up close and personal. And to give you an idea about my friend, General Poppas, son of a Greek immigrant, who suffered a lot, and he takes his kids to Arlington to show them his men and women that fell alongside him. Where were we on Saturday, Philip? We went to Arlington. In order to appreciate today and in order to look forward to tomorrow, you must understand history, from where we have come, how much harder the lives of those that came before us were. It is through the history pages that we find, I find solace. So, General, welcome. It's a pleasure to have you here. We talked before about Fort Bragg and that incredibly special 36 hours that we had. I'm very grateful for that. The people with me learned so much from that time. It's so important to see the pride and purpose that every single person that we met had on those 2 days. But maybe we should just start by, your history, your father's history, where you came from, and then we just see where this ends up.
I appreciate it. And for George, first, thank you very much. And when you talk about pride and purpose, I've had a touch point now, the time that I've been here, you can see that in the group that you've had. And the genesis came from, as you sat at this dinner, and as people are disparaging the Greeks, these are Greeks themselves. I didn't know that part of it. That makes it even worse as we turn on ourselves. But it manifests itself in action and a challenge to others in order to, how are you going to approach it? Are you going to continue to be a part of the problem, disparage who they're there, which is easy to do. That's the lazy man's approach. Know that there's a problem, do nothing about it, and just continue to amplify it. Or as you did, you challenge them, and you put in place this incredible internship program. And the hands that came up here, and the impact that's had, and you talk about pride and purpose. Well, he was at Fort Bragg. We had an opportunity to talk to the soldiers, train with them, do a lot of different events. First time shooting weapons for some, who are excellent marksmen, I might add. But you see that in every individual had. I will tell you, in the time I've had here, and I feel like I'm a pretty good judge of individuals, I've sensed that same exact level of pride. And the fact how many of the interns continue to remain as part of the Libra Group. That just shows that they found purpose in this organization. That doesn't happen by accident. And that's the leadership that you provide in this environment that is very welcoming, and it does allow people to achieve the best of who they can be. And I applaud you for that. And I walk away inspired and impressed by everybody that's here. And I will admit I've offered some to come down to Fort Bragg, and we're going to throw them out of an airplane with a parachute and give them some of the similar challenges.
Military empowerment.
Yeah, and Mike will tell you that you're going to survive it. He did it. I got a picture of him smiling from 10,000 feet high. So, but thank you. Thank you for letting me be a part of this. And you talk about a long road. My parents were both immigrants that came over. My father came over after World War II. So he was born in 31. So at 14, had gone through the war, the challenges of the first Italian, then Nazi occupation in Patra. And that leaves an indelible mark on the individual and the person that he is. Then he gets on a boat at 15 on his own, by himself. Mother, father was with him, and he shows up in New York and moves to Philadelphia. And the family that was supposed to meet him, some other Greeks that were there, this is before cell phones, so not his communication, they didn't show up. So as they waited for him to be picked up, his greatest fear was if they not get picked up, they're going to send him back. So he runs away, and he finds a Greek individual that's running a diner, surprise, and doesn't speak English at all. And he had a job with them, and he worked literally for weeks cleaning, because he provided him food and a place to live. He could sleep in the basement, but he had to clean up, and then he worked at the diner until the family came and got him. And you talk about philotimo and reaching out and taking care of those who you are. That was my father's beginning. And some of you have heard, so now he's a young boy. He's naturalized American, growing up in Upper Darby, Philadelphia, finishing high school. The 50s break out. He's out of high school. They said, congratulations, you're American. We're in the war with the Koreans. So he gets drafted, but he actually, since he spoke a number of languages and he had been part of the resistance during the occupation, that he went into counterintelligence, and he was stationed over in Germany, and he worked in the eastern portion where they'd pull out individual spies and do counterintelligence in the Russian sector and the Soviet sector. So then he broke back, and while over there, my mother, whose family came over before the war, And she grew up initially in Minnesota and then in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. They have a large Greek community. She graduates in the 40s from Marquette University. And for ladies here, she's a journalist. But my grandmother said women can't be journalists. So she also had to get a teaching degree, which still burned at my mom. But she wanted her own adventure. So if in the same time frame of the 50s, she sets out with one of her friends and is a journalist in Europe and is traveling through Europe at that time. And they actually met on a train. And I'll expand. So, Dad, I'm going to bore you with the story, but it's personal to me. So my dad's on a mission where they had a Russian signal officer. He crossed over, and they had him, but he wouldn't speak. And a signal officer is important because then you can understand all the way that they communicate. But he wouldn't speak unless they brought out his East German girlfriend. So my dad went across, and they find this woman, and then they pass off as husband and wife, and he brings her out of the east into the western side, and they're traveling on the train. And my dad walks down into the area where we can get coffee and such, and there's my mom-to-be traveling on the same train. And but now he's a married man, you know. So, but he struck this up, found out where she was, and then later, as he left, finished his mission, he went back to find out where she was and sought her out and says, "Hey, I'm George Poppas." He says, "You're a married man." Well, and he couldn't tell her why, but slowly he's a persistent and the tenacity paid off. But we ended up in Wisconsin. But when you look back, and the only thing I'll touch about is, and I spoke to George about this, is we grew up and we were told stories about Greece, how beautiful it was, every aspect. As a kid, we went to visit family, because most of our family was back then. I remember telling my dad in my 10-year-old or younger mind, "Dad, let's move back." I mean, we live in Janesville, Wisconsin. You know, it's beautiful, but not a tropical, you know, it's not a Mediterranean paradise. And he stopped and he was very serious. He said, "You don't realize I left for the opportunities that this country provides. I left because I would not be able to attain what I was able to attain in this country, where you're measured by the strength of your character, that it's a meritocracy. The only limiting factor in this nation is yourself. And if you think it's anything else, then shame on you," or less than that. And he strove for that and he pushed us. And education was the number one thing. I remember going out on school nights with my buddies. Absolutely not. Checking my homework, again, having mother as a journalist. I wrote better papers in high school than I ever did in college because I had her. And Dad was an engineer. He took his GI Bill and came back. But he drove that upon us. And growing up with understanding that and always looking at the opportunity. And he was an optimist, just as you are. And always found opportunities, once given to you, once earned, is your responsibility to make the most of them. And the pride, I have a sister who's a cardiologist at Brown University in charge of cardiology, took different paths. My brother had an engineering scholarship to Purdue, and I'll never forget when he came down, he told Dad, and I'm 3 years younger than him, and I was sitting there because I wanted to see the fireworks. And he told my dad, "You know, Dad, I don't want to go to Purdue. I want to go to New York University and go to film school. That's my passion." So I sat back and like, here it comes, you know, big brother's getting his, you know. And my dad said, "If that's your passion, then be the best then if I'm, you know, we'll do this." He was worried about the little boy from Janesville going to this big city out here. But he said, "Okay, but you need to be the best. You need to attain your goals. I will support you as long as that's your passion." And he did. And he did. He was surprised when I went to the military academy. My mom cried. The kid who wouldn't clean his room was now going to go out. But they were very supportive, absolutely supportive. I didn't think it was going to be a 36-year career at this point, with more still to go. But I fell in love with it. And I found it not so much the academy itself, a different environment, but once out into the Army, which I think is twofold. If you play team sports, the greatest locker room environment where you work together, achieve that goal, I find that in the Army, where you lift everybody up because you have to depend on each other. And I found that in the Army. And I also find it the greatest meritocracy. If you are good and you work hard, you will excel. And the only limiting factor, as my dad said growing up, is your own personal inspiration, your own personal drive. Anything that you don't achieve, it's because you failed to take advantage of those opportunities that are right in front of you. And I truly believe that.
Thank you, Drew. I mean, moving and profound. When I went to Fort Bragg, there were many emotions that I had. One of them was this is the first line of deterrent and the last line of defense of the West, and everything that we can sometimes take for granted. How does it feel to be such a prominent member of the leadership team that ultimately deters and defends?
Well, I take pride in being a member of that team, but it's also a great responsibility that's shared by many. Yeah, and Matt's back there and understanding the impact. Matt and I served together a few times. Just as I introduced Matt, I've known him for many years. We were together in the 101st. We spent a year in Afghanistan together. That split. He went to the 82nd. And by the way, when the Russia invaded Ukraine, if you remember, within the first 24 hours, we put 3,500 paratroopers out of the 82nd Airborne Division in Poland to show our assurance and deter the Russians. Matt was part of that first group that landed in Poland. And then when he finished his time there, I said, I got an opportunity for you. Come on back for 1 year. And that's what we're serving together today. And he's going to leave next year to be part of the Africa Command that's in Germany. But I just picked up last week as a major. He got picked up for Lieutenant Colonel, merit-based. So a lot of bragging on Matt. But so a little thanks. So Matt, congratulations. But you have to take the responsibility first for the formations that you're in charge of, because every decision you make, you know that there's often lethal consequences on the back end, and the responsibility of being an American and what that American flag means. Even back from the first Gulf War, when the 82nd again was put out in Saudi Arabia, when Iraq invaded Kuwait, and that was a picket line that did not have the strength to stop the onslaught of the Iraqis came across, and we knew that. But it's also the strength of the American flag, because behind that picket line of individuals is the might of a nation and the commitment of a nation. And deterrence philosophy is not only do you have the capability, but the will to use it. And that's what we represent everywhere we go. And I take pride in that. I've taken pride of what that meant to be able to liberate those or to provide assurances for the nations that are there. Initially, we were a deterrence force in Europe for what's taking place with the Ukraine. Now we're an assurance force, because you are the might of America. And though we may be maligned in many nations, they also know that we are an honest nation. We're a values-based nation. When the Army shows up, it's a sign of commitment to those nations. Mm. And I think it's absolutely important. We have to do that with rigor in our decisions and a full understanding by our senior leadership. And we have those discussions, and I've seen those with the presidents past and present. There's really nothing we can't do, but here's the implications of that. And it's not easy. We're going to do it. But if you make that decision, here's what the impact of that decision will be. And here's who you're putting in harm's way. And here's what the repercussions. We're going to do it. And it's eyes wide open. And I'm appreciative of the openness of the conversations that take place. So what I will tell you, when the decisions are made, they're very well informed by very intelligent people.
Thank you. And so, General, if you look back at leadership, and I mentioned before that you have a blend of steel, obviously, empathy, less obviously, humanity, humility. What do you do personally to preserve the humanity and humility side of the leadership equation, given the almighty responsibilities on the steel side of the equation?
And the beauty, and I'll say, the only thing that ruins a good war story is a witness. So as I say this, it's true. So if anything I say anything, just continue to look back at Matt. If he says, that's not true, he'll do it in private. But I do believe you don't start as a 4-star. This in the Civil War, we didn't buy our commission. We didn't buy the formations. It's earned through echelon that you've proved yourself throughout that. And I do think that's why I enjoy the infantry. It's a shared experience. And you need to be a part of the formation and understand individuals. And though the Army is full of people, it's about people. You have to know them on an individual level. Now, I don't know 750,000 by name, but I do know the formations and what's your span of control. And what we drive to understand is at every echelon, as a platoon leader, your first job as a lieutenant, you have about 40 people that are your subordinates. And that's where you should have that granular understanding of who they are. And I'll tell you, for the Army, it's at 06:30 every morning, you have physical training. The formation comes together. You get together a little before that. Everybody talks about it. What did you do last night? You just bought a motorcycle. I'm like, wait a second, you don't have a motorcycle license. Somebody's had a fight with their spouse or a son is on the honor roll. That bonding, that at 6:30 you fall in, the cannon goes off, the flag goes up, everybody salutes. When it's done, you right face and you step out, you do athletics together. No individual runs, but you're doing things by echelon, building that teamwork together. But it builds those bonds that you have to have an understanding. And while I talk about it at that lowest level, though you're removed, Matt will tell you every morning at 6:30, we're out there with them. Because it's important at every echelon that you're seen out there. And I tell them the worse the weather, the more visible you have to be to show them that it's the right thing to do. And you still have your touch points. We travel around, and in this job, it's all good karma, I say. I go to the pre-command courses for those that are about to take command of the battalions, about 700, or brigades, 3,500. And I talk to those leadership teams. We visit all the units when they're in these training cycles, first to make sure they're executing the tasks to the standard and get a feeling to make sure our guidance is being executed. But then you can have those individual discussions and have that feedback. And then I go to the commanders themselves and have conferences and bring people together. And I believe it's an environment that is open and honest, because if it were not, we can draw the wrong conclusions of where we are readiness-wise, what we need to do in the future. And I find those very open. We don't have them too big, but the commanders, the two-star commanders that are in charge of the divisions, about 25,000, down to the colonels, and we have very frank conversations in that environment. I believe that gives me a good insight, kind of a portal into the soul of the formations. As for the empathetic approach, I think that's just grown over 36 years, and especially after 4 years in combat with them in Iraq and Afghanistan, the depth of love I have for all the individuals we serve with.
Well, I two things. So one, I was a few years ago having dinner with General Petraeus.
Yeah.
And Misha Saakashvili, who was the president of Georgia, who is now terribly, sadly, almost dying in a Georgian prison. And this was 2016 on Misha's balcony. And we're sitting there, and it's General Petraeus, right? I mean, and he's sitting in front of me, and Misha Saakashvili's there. And Saakashvili, of course, was president when Russia invaded in 2008. And he was shouting at Petraeus. It's like, I think Petraeus was head of CENTCOM at the time. General, why did you give me, I don't know, S-64s or some military terminology? And the general was being very deliberate, and very, as he is, very kind of calm and measured with every word. And Saakashvili is being very undeliberate. We're shouting and, hey, in the middle of this, me watching this, Petraeus, Saakashvili, and I'm thinking, what the hell am I doing here? Petraeus says, George, yes, General, good. Leadership count. George. So that stuck with me. When I went to Fort Bragg with you, I was observing how you were interacting with the junior officers. Because it wasn't just going to the 3 stars or the foot, you were interacting with everyone. And they were, that lady we were talking about at the Innovation Center, and how she automatically adjusted when you came in and how brilliant she was. But that to me shows that leadership counts. And it's what you say. It's not being imperious, right? I mean, sometimes you've got to be tough. Obviously, we're like huge, every tribe needs its leader, right? But what gets the endurance, the love, the commitment is people that feel that they're working for something greater than themselves. And I saw that live at Fort Bragg. So with that in mind, and knowing that we have 20, 30 interns and leaders of tomorrow, and quite frankly, ex-interns that are leaders of today, and leaders of today, and leaders of yesterday, and everything in this room, what advice do you have for them? If they, the younger ones who are from all over the world, I mean, we have from Africa, from Colombia, from Green, what advice do you have for them wearing the leadership count jacket?
Yeah, leadership counts of Petraeus. And then it's great. And that resonates with me because I had a boss, General Campbell, that, his leadership makes a difference. And it absolutely does. Because as a leader, and you're all leaders yourself, you are absolutely responsible for everything your organization, your division, your element, whatever it may be, whatever that does, whatever it accomplishes or fails to accomplish falls on your shoulders. So how do you set those standards? How do you inspire? How do you engage and articulate to those that work for you? First, here's what the mission is. Here's what we must attain. And then make that very understandable. So you have to have the vision, then you have to be able to articulate what that is, then provide the path to get there, and then feedback throughout. So 4 components to all of that. And that's our responsibilities as leaders, no matter what echelon you are. Now, the narrative might change by the aperture in which you're talking about, but there's also that granular level in the personal, that I should know who, if you're part of my team, I should know who you are. I should know what your personal goals are. I should know about your family, without being intrusive. But that also, because then there's a human dimension to all of this. And that doesn't make you soft. And I do believe you should wear your rank lightly. Nobody out there doesn't realize I'm a 4-star. And I've accepted the fact where I go, it's a disturbance. It just is. And it's unfortunate. You don't think yourself that, but you are. But how you then act, wear it softly. And then as General Petraeus and Campbell, mentors of mine, and though we're the same rank, I will still call them sir, is use your rank for good. You are in a position of leadership and authority. As we just talked about, obtaining that. But if people know that you're committed to their personal well-being, to their personal goal advancement and obtaining that, you're going to get more out of them. And you can hold people accountable. If you don't meet the standard, not using you as a personal example, but if you don't, we'll have the discussion. If you continue to fail to meet the standard, you won't be part of the organization. That's the nature of the beast. But we're going to give you an opportunity to meet that and be better. But you have to have that individual understanding. And I found if you have a separation and there's this caste system out there and you just dictate without the human dimension, you're never going to meet the full potential of your organization. But just like that team that we talked about on whatever pitch it may be, if everybody's working together and you're going to have everybody doing their role, there's the quarterback, whoever may be the field leader, if you're pulling together for that inherent goal that everybody's committed to, then you can rise above the constraints of position.
Thank you. Well said. So I'll go 2 more questions, and then the first person to put up their hand to ask one closing question. The younger, the better. The more aspirational the question, the better. General, how did your Greek roots influence you in your life?
Well, my Greek roots influenced me in a number of ways, and it starts with my parents. Still the greatest inspiration. My mother passed, unfortunately, and my father's still with me, and he still gives me guidance on everything. That's the beauty of Greek. There's no shortage of opinion. But I think, in fact, I know for a fact, especially going to the academy, and the person I'm today wasn't the same 17-year-old that walked into the Army in uniform. You grow in time and you get inculcated with the values. But the value that my father placed upon him is the same one I talked about earlier. A complete love of what this country provided for our family, the opportunities for him and for him to provide for his family. And as everybody knows, when your parents are there, they're the one person left always wants you to be better than they were. And that's exactly where my father was. But the commitment to the nation, commitment to the family, commitment to your community was something that he had inculcated with us. And that's carried me through. And then also, no matter where you go, the only one who can give away your good name is yourself. And your personal conduct, your integrity is everything. And you can lose that. And I think Mike smiled because I tell the story, when we were a kid growing up, if we did something wrong, and it didn't have to be an egregious event, but if I did something wrong as a child, I lost the ability to tell people my last name because I dishonored the family. Yeah, and we talk about now. But if you're 8, that's pretty impactful. So I'd say, my name's Andy. Well, what's your last name? Well, they'd be there until I earned it back through my conduct. That stuck with me. And it is right. And it stuck with me as a lieutenant. And your integrity and your word and the achievements of the formation are a reflection of who you are. And those accomplishments aren't you alone, but it's the group, and harkens back to my father. My mother's a little softer on that. She's like, George, let him, you know. Yeah.
You're amazing. And those Greek values, which I guess in many ways, values have been diluted as time goes by, right? And the algorithm and technology take all the precedent. I remember my grandmother, we've told her before, she was 21 years old, in Kiev, just a girl in Kiev, and all of a sudden the Germans come. They start taking people, shooting them. There's a German frigate. She never left the island. You go forward 20 years later, her husband has a heart attack, almost dies, they almost lose everything. She had to step up as a 40-year-old woman, which is unusual in 1962. So those words, bandabro, it's very simple. And for the non-Greeks in the room, because of course not everyone's Greek, but the Colombian, what it means is always forward. So when something's going wrong, always forward, man. We elect how we respond to everything that comes at us. We're fragile, we're human, we get angry, we get depressed. It happens to me all the time. But how do you then adapt to that?
That's a very Greek thing. I look at 1921, my family's kicked out of northern Turkey, and they end up in Athens. They lose everything, the business, everything. So they move from, prosperity to poverty. And then they build it back and they move to Patras. And my father's born. Then tying them the Nazi occupation. And through that, poverty again, it comes over individually in the family and it grows it back. But that same theme, you talk the virtues of what's provided from the family, duty, resiliency, honor, commitment, all of those, those circle through my mind. I hear my father's voice and yours, and it's important.
That's America, because our people have been running for hundreds of years. Running. Same with my family. They ran here, then they ran there, then the Germans come, before them the Bolsheviks come, and then America comes, and there's them all running. And I think our duty is to preserve those values whilst appreciating the opportunity. Because the appreciation can dilute as the years go by. Life is not ending. So last question is, if you look back at your career and you look at the good, the bad, the difficult, the ugly, everything, if you were to pick one of the greatest challenges that you faced and had to overcome, just which would it be?
Oh yeah.
And how is you overcome?
It is in combat. It was in Iraq during one of our first formations, and we had, and just to take a step back, we were very close formations. We started, it was a 700-person battalion, and then the Army transformed, and in the 82nd, where I was in, we got pulled in and said, we want you to stand up the 1st Airborne Cavalry Squadron. So from about the 700 down to just over 300. So we had a competition. So we knew everybody in the battalion, so we got to pick the best. We had a physical competition, and we actually used, if you look back, the Greek, we used the Spartan methodology. I had to read Gates of Fire and who's the leader you want to be. It's about the team. And it's, if a Spartan lost his helmet or his chest plate, he wasn't punished. But if he lost his shield, he was. Because the helmet and breastplate protected yourself, whereas the shield protected the man to your left. So it's about the team, not individual accolades. So we built this ethos, and we drew down from 700 to this 300 plus team, and then we deployed Iraq. So we knew each other. It was down to that personal level, all the challenges we had going through that. And it was a hard deployment. So we had over the time of 15 months, and think about that. And my wife just told me, hey, I'm pregnant for number 3. I'm like, hey, I'm out in a week. I'll be back in 15 months. But it was a hard deployment. We had 22 dead, over 100 wounded. And in that, the hardest challenge I think we had that we overcame, me personally, is you're committed to it completely. You're in the middle of the fight. It's a hard area. We had moved right along the Iranian border, and it was a very demanding fight, daily. And then the losses start to build, and you put more energy to it, and the intellectual capability, and you think, and the enemy gets a vote. And I think it happened. We had an operation, and we had 4 people killed on that day. And then coming out of that, it was very personal because these people I knew and one that we had talked about. I remember it captured me because we had some before and then even after. That I thought, I'm failing. I am putting everything into this. If you look at the picture, I had satellite photos of the entire region. We were looking at that, where they got killed. Shouldn't have happened. The enemy gets a vote too. And I just remember thinking, I am failing these people that I care about. And what more can I do to do that? What more can I do to change this dynamic? And you're not alone, but that was a feeling that was hard to overcome. But what I realized, because one was a very close friend of mine that he died that day, and I thought, holy smokes. But you don't get time to grieve. And as a leader, until you stop grieving, your formation can't. So redoubling, taking a step back, it is my responsibility. I've got to step in front of everybody because everybody's hurting at this point. Because we'd taken some losses, but this one was particularly important. And then stand in front of them and say, hey, this is a galvanizing point for us. We have to understand. And they believed in the mission, and talk to them and go back into the fight and just, reinvigorate the formation and in doing that. And I didn't know if I could do that because of the impact that these losses have had. But it worked. And I talked to some other leaders that were with me, and I didn't share all of it with them. I said, hey, I need your help. We've got to pick up our heads. We've got to look at what the enemy's doing. We've got to redouble our intelligence. And then keeping the formation moving with their heads up with the belief in the mission that we're executing. We still got 8 months to go. There's no quitting. And it's interesting because then a little bit further from that, and we focused on that. It's April 23rd. We had a dual car bomb that killed 9 in one day, the greatest loss that the 82nd had had. But afterwards, it was terrible. But we had that galvanizing time when people really were committed. And General Petraeus came out. And he came out and he said, hey, I'm not here to hand out awards. He was coming out to see us. It was fun. Nobody asked him to, but it was surprising because he was the 4-star at the time. I was the lieutenant colonel of this squadron that had been isolated on the thing, and we'd been in the fight for a while. And then afterwards, he sat down with us and sat down with the leaders, and we talked about the mission. Hey, we took this loss. Here's what we need to do. We've now identified this. We had a very good engagement with him. And we were hurting, but we talked about the future, and here's how we're going to get back after the enemy. Here's what our mission is. And he talked to the soldiers, too. And he came back and he says, hey, tell me who you think deserves awards and coins and these pieces. But no, that's great. What I didn't realize, and he had only told me later because I saw him at a conference that I've got to respect, is he came out to assess the morale of the formation. Were we still capable of being an efficient fighting force, or had the losses we had taken broken our morale and our spirit? And when I realized talking out, and I learned that afterwards, because he said, and then by engaging with the soldiers, though, he realized that the ethos of the formation was strong. And though we took losses, and individually we were hurting, of course, because they're friends, we still understood what we had to do. And I reflect back on our training methodology, where we did everything together, from the PT in the morning to the weapons training, we took our cooks and we took our mechanics and made them go through the shoot house, because in the smaller unit, we knew that everybody fights. And that was everything from the newest private to the battalion commander. Everybody's in the fight. Nobody stays on there. And it was with shared hardship, shared understanding of the mission, continuous engagements that have formed the formation. And from that has actually set the conditions for how I've approached training ever since. So the hardest time, those losses, overcoming it and realizing the strength that we had didn't come because of that moment after. It's because everything we did leading into that. So now that we're in charge of training, we drive it hard. And when officers aren't out in the field, because like, oh, I've got admin to do, I've got this, and get out there. You're part of the team. Because if you're not part of the team doing the training, when it gets hard, they're not going to have trust in you later. And that, I think, carries to any point of leadership. Your physical presence has an impact on the formation.
Well, thank you for your leadership. Thank you for your service. Matt, thank you for yours. Leadership counts, but so does community count, right?
Yeah.
So, Mr. Colombia, yes. Do you want to introduce yourself? What are you doing? Who are you? I know who you are.
First, we had an agreement beforehand. If it's a hard question, George gets it.
I didn't.
All right, that's fair.
Hello, everyone. I'm Camilo Gutierrez. I'm from Colombia. I'm working at Libra Group, Libra Capital, under the strategy team with Fedra. It's been a great opportunity, and thank you for all your inspiring words. And I hope this question inspires more projects, especially for the picking up on the opportunity you were talking about, about how this country has given great opportunities for so many families as yours. We were just chatting about, and the general shared to me a statistic about how more than 80% of new enlisted people in the Army had a member of his or her family in the Army. And we chatted about how we think there's a great unconsciousness around the importance and the value the Army adds to society. How do we encourage more young men and women to enlist into the Army? How do we build a more enthusiastic and knowledgeable culture around the Army to preserve these opportunities to so many families?
I will give you my touch point, because this is something that's affecting the Army today, is we're not meeting our recruiting goals. And it starts with exposure. The first thing that is, 83% had a service member, of the service members had a family member. But I followed it up with, to me, that's problematic. because then it starts to become a family business. And in a nation where it's not compulsory service, it's supposed to be representative of the fabric of the nation, so it has to be everybody. So part of it's going to have to be exposure. Why would I commit myself? Why would I commit my sons and daughters to this? Is it worthwhile? There's a narrative out there that I'm not sure is been beneficial. I will say, though, that once we get personnel in, we are exceeding our retention goals. So once people come in, they're realizing it is a land of opportunity. It is a good place for me as an individual, as I'm part of a team and I'm meeting these aspirational goals. So we're actually exceeding our retention goals, and we're keeping that. Actually, I'll bring the new people in quick enough. You get a rank imbalance, but that's a good reflection. But it's the outreaches that we have to do. How do you communicate with, the target audience, which is really about 18 to 25 now, not just those coming into out of high school, but then a couple years older, a couple years of college, or they're at that point after high school and they spend a few years and now they want to look for something more. And that's, how do you communicate with that flow? And then how do you communicate with the parents that are involved to make sure that they're supportive of that? So when they come home and say, hey, I want to go in the Army, and the parent will go, absolutely not. And that's the challenge that we're having today. Part of it is the outreach. Part of it is George came down and gave him, exposure to these incredible. And we didn't handpick these people. In fact, when we went to the Innovation Center, it wasn't even on the schedule here. We had one and just said, you have an Innovation Center? I'd like to see that.
What was the colonel's name? The lady?
The lieutenant. Yeah, young lieutenant going to Marquette University as an engineer, and she's running it for a post that's 59,000 people.
But this is maybe a 25-year-old young lady, and it was the one time we went to one of the visits on the tour without the general. She was very relaxed. She was amazing. And then the general arrived, and you saw this young lady go into a full-scale panic for a split second, right? Because the general's here. Then adapt immediately and hold the room for 15 minutes.
Yeah.
And that was leadership. And it was so inspiring to see that. And I think, just to add to the general's point, Camilo, when I went there, I repeat, it was a very moving 36 hours that we had. These are people that are defending the democracy, man. I mean, it's just that simple. And, I said it the other day, freedoms granted or freedoms earned. We did not earn most of the freedoms that we currently have. They were given by this gentleman, by the grandparents, the people that came before, and we are benefiting from that. So the fact that we went, when I came back from Fort Bragg, any person that I met, as my staff know, be it the President of the United States or interns, right? I would tell them about my trip to Fort Bragg. And so that got the word out to policymakers, to young people, to future leaders. And the last thing I'll say to you is, when we had the dinner, which was a great dinner, and the general, he's like, George, sit here at the head of the table. I'm not sitting at the head of the table. It's your seat. He said, no, sit there. I'm like, I'm not going to sit there. She's like, all right. So we took the name tag, swapped up. He's like, now sit there. I said to him, General, I saw many lost souls. And I chose my words very carefully. So these were people that you could see the residue of lostness in their character formation and the way they were talking and thinking, but they had purpose, man. At the end of the day, we all need a purpose to be the best version that we can be. And I think, I'm hopefully going to go back to Fort Bragg or Fort Liberty, as it's called now, in June. It was such a inspiring experience, also because I'm a student of leadership. And, I've studied political leaders and business leaders and philanthropic leaders. A few weeks ago, music leaders. Well, that was very interesting to see a maestro perform a concert. Very interesting. Leadership in a very different way. Military leadership. It all comes from there. To me, military leadership is the top. And that's why the people that I work with, wherever they are, they know the words MSP. Do you know what MSP means? Well, military style precision, boys and girls. MSP. We have much to be grateful.
I'm interested how we can better communicate what these opportunities are. We have a whole recruiting branch, but and it is problematic. The Army is 485,000 people. We're at 452 right now. That's a 30,000 person gap. I'll use a football analogy. If your offensive line that's got 5 people, if you're missing one, somebody fills in. In the Army, you don't fill in, so you actually have a gap in that element. Well, your quarterback will never survive if you're only have 4 linemen. We've got to fill our ranks, or it becomes an existential risk because we can't meet our global requirements, and the global requirements continue to go up.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Great question.
Guys, thank you. I hope you found this as interesting as I did. We have much to be grateful for. Thank you.
Well, thank you. What a day we had.